Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Indeed we are. And as I was preparing to do this program, I kept thinking about how did I want to approach this, because we're recording this on January 18, 2023. So we're 18 days into the new year. And it occurred to me as I was planning this that, by now the various New Year's resolutions that people have established are probably going up in smoke. A few of them might still be working. Some are going at it assiduously, but for a lot of people, they even forgot they made them. And, the holidays are past. They're well past. We're like almost 3 weeks past the end of the holidays. And so all that holiday thing is kind of like in the deep dark past almost at this point. And now we're dealing with, oh my God, we're in a new year. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're dealing with the fact that it's winter. There's a lot of stuff going on. I figured, Jody Lynn, that gives us a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think it does. It's perfect.
No matter what angle we come in at, it's going to be, okay, we got issues there, got issues there, got issues there. They're all over the place. Yeah. Well, let's start with resolutions. And I think I'm going to guess that I know what your attitude toward resolutions is. I think we may even have talked about it. I'm not sure. I know my attitude is don't bother, because that's really not the way to go about doing life. If you're going to make a resolution, don't make it a New Year's resolution. Make it an ongoing resolution that you're just going after every single day of the year. But New Year's resolutions, there's something, I don't know a nice way to say it. There's something weak about them.
Yeah. It feels so much like FOMO, like, oh my God, everybody else is doing it. I should probably do something too. What's my resolution? Pick your word of the year. This? People do that. I know I have felt, I was a huge goal setter for a long time. At Christmas would be my time where I would review my year. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. There's no good, there's no bad. Like it's just something that I always did. And then I would set these goals. So instead of resolutions, because I didn't really believe in the resolution, it felt like it was super surface level. I wouldn't set resolutions. I would set goals, and I would build out an entire plan of my year. I would back engineer how I would do it and all of that stuff.
You're thorough.
Yeah, it was really amazing plan. But what I felt over the last few years is disconnected. And it actually comes back to winter. And flowing with the seasons. It felt for me more this year than any other year. I really felt into that disconnection of making this elaborate plan for how my life was going to be different, better, whatever in 2023. And just sat with that, what does flow feel like? What is this season of my life? What are the actual seasons? Right now, I'm in Canada and it's hibernation season.
Yes.
It's rest, it's relaxation. So I decided to do that instead and start just reflecting with ease and grace on, some of the things that I would like to be different and why and how and whatever. And instead of making this, 28-point plan and agenda that I'm going to rigorously follow January 1st come hell or high water, I just allowed myself to flow with the season. Literally.
So that's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. When you have a 28-point plan, that's stressful.
100%. Yeah.
And you're an expert at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're trying so hard. It's the way that I was before when I would do this plan is that I would try and force something to happen. Yeah. Like Abraham Hicks talks about going upstream. I would paddle like the Dickens, to go in the direction that I wanted to. And I would start to see, pops of things happening. But it took a lot of force. And now what I know about, force versus flow, the flow of the river will carve through a mountain in no time. It is more powerful than you trying to force your way upstream. So I really wanted to be mindful of that and go with the flow of things instead.
Yeah, with a 28-point plan, it doesn't sound like you were just paddling upstream. You were paddling upstream while trying to build the boathouse at the same time.
100%. Hammering while paddling. Yeah. And then, if you have such a rigid plan like that, this was my experience, is that, in the first couple of weeks, like every week was regimented. Like I needed to be here and I needed to be here. Then by the time that I got to the 18th of January or the middle of the month or whatever, for sure by the end of January, when I wasn't exactly where I had to be, quote unquote, it would be devastating.
Yeah.
And I would have so much frustration and angst. And then I'd have to redo the entire plan because the first month didn't go the way that I wanted it to go.
That's a really great point, because I don't think people realize when they set resolutions, they're setting themselves up for failure.
Yeah.
They're setting themselves up for massive disappointment and beating an opportunity. Well, it's not just an opportunity to beat yourself up. You've already beaten yourself up. You're just noticing the results by the end of January. But you set yourself up earlier. You by saying, I'm going to have this amount of X happen by the end of January, by the end of February, and it doesn't happen. You just beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of beat yourself before it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting kind of crime, right? You commit the crime before it actually happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you think about all the emotion that goes into that, the disappointment, the regret, you're beating yourself up. I'm not good enough. All of these things come slamming into your face.
Yeah.
Because you're not where your plan says you should be, or you have to be. Because if you're not there, then you're never going to get there.
So I'm curious now, because I've had numerous people on the show, over the years, coming from a variety of different perspectives. And I've had a few people on who were very much into goal setting and who thought goal setting was a great idea. And I have always expressed reservations, but I usually did, I don't tend to be very, in your face kind of facing you down on what it is that you're saying. That's not my style. But I've always been a little bit, confused about how to address the concern to the person who's the big goal setter. I mean, if you were talking to that person advocating goal setting from where you are right now and what you've been through and what you've experienced, how would you present to them the idea that you found goal setting to actually be counterproductive? Yeah, I know that's a tough one.
Yeah, I know. How would I present it as being counterproductive? I think I would put on display the pressure, and the limitations that we place on ourselves when we're so, I guess, blinded or like stuck in this box of it has to be this way. And how doing that is really cutting off the other billion possibilities that exist for you to get to the same point. And it cuts off a lot of the joy as well.
Yeah.
Because, there's only one way to get there, and this one way is going to be this way. And, your brain is only looking for that possibility now. And unless it comes that way, you don't think it's right or it's good enough or whatever. So it's just cutting a lot of possibilities out of your, reality that could be possible for you. And a lot of joy, the joy of the journey. You're so focused upon that one destination that you're missing the life that it takes before you even get there.
That's a great point. Those are a couple of great points in there. In fact, the joy of the journey, when you use that phrase, I was reflecting back on what is now my well-documented last 3 months, from the point where Louise left and all the stuff I've been going through in between. Mm-hmm. And I've really gotten to the point where I got to the point fairly quickly that I was tired of fighting all of it. And I think that's almost what you have to do in order to get to the point where you're willing to let go of the paddle so you can go downstream. You just have to kind of give up. I'm tired of fighting it. And so I got to that point, and I'm experiencing something really interesting / strange. On the one hand, craziness still happens because I'm still, the plates are still flying around. Some of them have landed, some have not, and so forth. Yep. So crazy stuff is happening. But I find I'm not actually spending a lot of time doing anything about it. Which is a very, I mean, that's not the me of old. I was the one, we've talked about this before, and you're the same kind of person in the background, in the past. The kind of person who's just, okay, let's go at it. We got to fix this thing. We got to solve this. We got to do this. We got to get this list done. And I'm not doing that. And there are literally times, Jody, when I sit here and I say, okay, so what am I supposed to do now? Because I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that feeling, getting to that point of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then having the courage to sit with that and then listen and then act when you are inspired to act, or you're given like a breadcrumb and you're like, ooh, I want to go check out this. I think, that's getting to the spice of life, the joy of life, like really learning to have faith in faith, having faith that the universe will support you, faith that you're going in the right direction, and allowing yourself to be led by perhaps forces greater than you, I will say. But, I think that's where the magic is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. That is where the magic is. It's also where if you're not used to it, it's a little bit disorienting.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you sit like, I am supposed to be doing something, especially if you're like a reformed A-type, forcer, like I was. Like literally, in my brokerage business, they would call me the Beast.
Really?
Yes.
That's like the last word I would ever think to apply to you.
Yeah, the Beast. Like there was like, they would laugh and be like, oh, have you ever seen Jody's beast mode? Like,
holy cow.
Yeah. I was a completely different person.
Wow. Would I have recognized you?
No.
Oh
No, I'm sure that like, if you look at my pictures, my face, like my facial structure has changed. My eyes have changed. Like, I don't know how that actually happens, but I know that
apparently
there's that show Liars or something like that, where they look at points on your face and they can tell what emotions you're actually feeling. And then I don't know, there was one about, I think, Nixon, and they showed how much his face changed over time. I don't know anything about Nixon, but I just remember that from that show. So I'm sure that if you looked at my pictures from, 7 years ago or so, that I would look very different.
Well, he was called Tricky Dick for a reason. So
yeah, there you go. Yeah. So
but the Beast, oh my goodness, I can't imagine the Beast. That's
Beast.
Yeah.
Yep. The Beast. Yeah. So, I mean, going from that place where I had the, 28 million point plan and you knew exactly what I was
I noticed how it just grew, by the way. It was a 28 point plan about 10 minutes ago. Now it's 28 million.
Oh, yeah, 28 million. Well, like it was 28 high level points that each broke down into 28 other points, and that each of those 28 other points broke into what I would do on an hourly basis. Like every second of my life was scheduled. But what that did, was really like overdrew my my system.
Yeah.
Everything was working at this pace that was not sustainable. Like I got so many calls intuitively and through different healers that I was going to die, that I was going to end up in the hospital.
Wow.
That happened multiple times. Like, you got to get a handle on this because you're going to end up in the hospital and die. And I ignored that for a really long time. Too, because I had to do. And then I was programmed to, if I wasn't doing, then I wasn't good enough. Then I wasn't contributing. Therefore I didn't deserve. So it wrapped up into so many other things. And my nervous system was completely out of whack. So much so that I couldn't even sit through a movie without being like,
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was awful. I couldn't sit still.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
It's recovery.
I'm trying to think, is there any time when I can identify with not being able to sit through a movie because my nervous system is going nuts? And it's possibly happened, but I can't recall it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's just
it's crazy.
Mind-boggling. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, looking back, I was never in this moment that I was sitting in. I was always in the past or in the future. So I was never in this moment where that's where all the power is right now.
That's easy though. I think all of us have probably a lot of experience with being out of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you kind of did it to the nth degree. So, I don't want to say well done, but you were really good
because I was
at
a beast.
Yeah. By the way, I'm curious, when did they stop calling you the beast? I mean, they must have noticed at some point.
Yeah. I mean, they still reflect on it fondly. Like
fondly?
I
would challenge their sense of humor, but okay.
It is still something to this day that they reflect on with awe, that I had such capacity to work like that. Like I was a workhorse.
I gotcha.
And that's why they called me the beast, is because I could outwork anybody. And I would be there earlier than everyone and later than everyone. And I was always working. I was always doing something. But I took it further when I was reflecting on my life. I was a beast in a lot of ways. I didn't make time for people. I didn't make time for my family. I didn't really make time for my friends unless they were in that small circle that were working with me. I didn't spend time caring about anyone, not in the way that I have the capacity to care for. So I was a beast on a lot of levels.
What you're talking about is when I was growing up, we would call that a workaholic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's exactly what that is.
Yeah. So, I mean, several years ago, I stepped back from my brokerage business because in that environment, that was celebrated. That was something that people worshipped me, for lack of a better term, for what I could do in that way. They're like, oh my God, Jody, she's such a beast. It was something that was lifted up and celebrated. And I couldn't be in that environment and step away from that way of being. Yeah. So I had to step back from that environment. I had my own office, so that was easy. I didn't have to go and see those people, but I did put up a lot of walls and took a big step back. So I don't know how they all took it, but I have heard different things like, oh, I wish we still had the old Jody.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Mm-hmm. So they don't really grasp what it was doing to you.
No. And I lost a lot of really good friends over it, like best friends. Yeah. They just left. They exited stage left out of my life.
Yeah. Well, I can get it. I mean, it makes sense to me. And I give you credit, first of all, for making the change, and second of all, for being willing to be so open about it. That's a hard thing that you went through and that you've come through the other side. So you deserve credit for that.
Thank you. Yeah. My life is so much sweeter on this side of things. I thank the woman that I was in those moments. I mean, there was a lot that I learned from it, and I wouldn't change it because I'm here because of it. But I'm really grateful I don't operate like that. I wouldn't have a husband if I still continued to operate like that. I would have never found him.
I'm sure. Yeah. And we would never have had the privilege of having the sweet, intelligent, wonderful contributor that you are here on the podcast. So yeah.
Oh, thank you.
No, I'm serious. I mean, I've loved having you on the show, and I know listeners have as well. So yeah, that's really something. Getting back to the topic of the resolutions, then we're making resolutions sound really awful. I mean, they must have some good purpose, but so far we're beating the crap out of them.
Yeah, we really are. Well, and I think if it's something that is coming from a place of love, I want to be better to my body this year and not treat it like a stolen car. Or, I want to be more in touch with my relationship with money and understand where I spend my money, why I spend my money on these things, and get to a point where I can pay off some debts, or I can do this or that, or go on vacation. We often make a resolution about the things that we are not happy with in life. And that's where it comes from, is that negative place of my life is shit. So my body is shit, my finances are shit, or like whatever, right? It's typically coming from that space. So that's, I think, one simple shift that people can make is coming from a more loving place. Okay. Yeah. You might not have the body that you want today, but you could be coming from a place of love. And that would look like, I want to treat my body better. I want to give it the food that it needs. I want to nourish it. I want to love it, and then be open to what that looks like every day.
You're reminding me, one of the very, very, very first interviews I ever did on this podcast 10 years ago was with a gentleman who was an up and coming comic. He was, in the same generation as, the Ellen DeGenereses of the world. They were all coming up around the same time. I know Drew Carey was in that group. There were a number of them, and they were all friends and so forth. And he's the only one who didn't make it because he dropped out. And he dropped out so he could become a corporate speaker, basically to help people find their true passion in life, because he wasn't following so much of true passion. He was a very funny guy. But he wasn't really following his true passion. And the reason I thought of him is because as you were describing, this shit and that shit and so forth, I was remembering the title of his book. His book is entitled Get Your Shift Together.
Ah, I love that.
And I'm thinking, I got to reach out to him, see if I can find him again, because he was a fun interview. He was one of the most fun interviews I had very early on. Such a funny guy. Oh my goodness. But yeah, that's what I kept thinking about, because that making that shift, that is getting your shift together.
Yeah.
Really,
Absolutely. That's a huge one.
Mm.
And you know what? Most people at this point in January 18th, the 18th of January, middle of January, closer to the end of January, they kind of give up on whatever they vowed to do, whatever that resolution was, or that if they had a 28-point plan, the portion of them might be giving up because they're not where they think they should be. And making that shift of doing something for love will make that, the 18th marker completely different.
Yeah.
I remember, 2021 on my birthday, which is in July, I had decided it was like a birthday resolution.
Okay.
And I didn't call it a resolution. I just set the intention that I wanted to lose some weight. I wanted to be at my ideal body weight. And you know what? I was very fluid with that concept and that feeling. I just wanted to be healthy, and I wanted to, again, love my body. I wanted to get to know it better and whatever. So I started with food. Because for me, that's always worked in the past. I've done crash diets, lost weight. So I knew that, controlling my food, so to speak, that I could achieve the goal that I wanted. And it was about 30 pounds that I wanted to lose, somewhere in there. But I was, again, very fluid on the number, because in my mind, I had thought, when I was 135 pounds, I felt X, Y, and Z. I'm curious if I get to that point that I'll feel the same way. So I was open to it. And I remember it was 2021. And I remember it was right before Christmas, maybe like November or something like that. And I was like, this is bullshit. I would have quit. Like, I stepped on the scale and I had lost like 10 pounds or something since July. It was like not good enough. And I started beating myself up, and I'm like, what's the point anyway? I should just have some cookies and cake, and I don't even care. I should just quit. And then I sat with that for a minute, and I thought, why? Why would I quit? Like, what's quitting going to do? Well, then I can eat whatever I want. And then it was a question of, are you not allowed to eat anything that you want? And is there a way that you can still have everything that you want?
Yeah.
And lose weight?
Exactly.
Perhaps, yes. I think that there is. Okay, I'll try that. And then the thought dawned on me of like, okay, if you stop now, like completely, like I'm just going to go back to not caring about what I'm eating and just eat whatever and not care whatsoever. At some point, the months are going to pass by, and I'm going to get to my birthday again and wish that I hadn't hadn't have quit.
Mm-hmm.
Wish that I just stuck with something.
Yeah.
So, whether it takes me a year or it takes me 2 years, that time is going to go by either way. Mm-hmm. So I can either continue on learning about my food habits and why I eat certain things and what my body needs. And, the results will eventually come where the weight leaves. Or I can quit now and get to my birthday in a year from now or 2 birthdays from now and be like, man, I wish I would have just stuck with it.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I kind of had a similar thing, not quite. But it was similar in that weight was involved. When my soon-to-be ex, Louise, in 2018, she experienced hyperthyroidism. Mm-hmm. And it got pretty severe. And there's a whole story that we've told about that. There was one of the visits to one of the doctor's offices where I decided to weigh myself because we didn't have a bathroom scale. We had never had a bathroom scale throughout our relationship, including up to the point where we broke up. And one of the reasons was we both were of the mindset, why would I want to have something in there to keep torturing myself with?
Yep.
So we didn't have a bathroom scale. And now my ideal weight is somewhere around 200, maybe 205 pounds. Mm-hmm. I climbed on the scale. Now I did have my winter coat on. Okay. But I climbed on the scale and it came out to 238. And I said, oh, now you have to understand, I'm somebody who has throughout his entire life had a high metabolism. I've never had to even think about weight, never even an issue. And now all of a sudden I'm finding I'm like 30 pounds overweight. Like, how did that happen?
What happened here? Yeah.
Bit of a surprise, right? So from that point on, that we had a fair amount of sugar in our diet at that point, and I'd already been kind of harping on that a little bit, and I started to harp on it a little bit more, like, let's cut this down. Let's cut down on the carbs. Let's cut this stuff back. And it also fit what Louise needed to do too, because she was trying to get off of the drugs they were putting her on for the hyperthyroidism. So cut to the chase of a few years later, we have the breakup, right? So we're breaking up last October, and she hadn't made much progress. I wasn't sure what progress I had made in terms of weight, but I ended up doing something after she moved out, and I'm kind of getting my home for myself organized. I said, you know what? I'm going to get a bathroom scale. I'm curious. I want to know, I feel like I made some progress. I mean, the bulge isn't as big as it was in the front, maybe I'm trying to rationalize it, but that's what my sense of it was. So I got a scale, and I got one of the new digitals that are accurate to like 1/10 of a pound.
Yeah.
And so I got it, and sure enough, I'd lost like almost 20 pounds. I said, ooh, okay.
That's amazing.
Now that's over a course of like, a 4-year period, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's without trying at all. That's like, all I did was cut down some sugar. That was it.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? I did a little research because I had never looked into this stuff before. I had no idea what you actually did. I've had people on the show talking about weight loss, and, that part, whenever they got to the weight loss part, I always kind of tuned that out because I was looking more about mindset. But now I'm actually looking like, okay, so what's involved? Like, how quickly do you lose weight? I was looking into all that stuff. And I said, okay, well, conceivably I could lose this, what do I have left? I got about 18 pounds or so I want to get rid of, right? I could conceivably get rid of that in the next few months. It just depends on, what I'm willing to do, and I can do it without starving myself. There ought to be a way to do that. So I started experimenting, playing with it.
Yeah.
And I was getting a different kind of experience. Instead of being tortured by what was happening, I was enthralled. Like, oh, I just had dinner, and sure enough, I went up 2 pounds. When, I slept, oh my goodness, it came down 3 pounds. And I'm watching this bouncing like, this is really interesting. And I'm realizing this is stuff that drives most people nuts. And that's why they have so much trouble when they're dealing with weight loss. But for me, it was like, this is really fascinating. I went out and I took a walk. I came back. I lost 0.4 of a pound. That's really interesting. Things like that, So as I'm learning this, I'm also recognizing, boy, you see right off real fast. You take in, a cookie with sugar or something like that, and boom, like, oh my goodness, that really reacted fast,
Yeah.
So I was actually finding it wasn't so much a negative. It was more of a positive reinforcer. Like, well, look what happens when you do this. Look what happens when you do that. You change this and you do that and you include that and you take that out. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was not a stressful experience. It was a fun experience. And the only goal, if you can call it that, was at some point get it down to the 200, 205 range.
Yeah.
And that was about it. There was no date attached. There was no schedule. There was no 28-point plan. It was just, let's see if we can kind of get in that direction.
Yeah.
I've been kind of bouncing around because I have been experimenting, and, sometimes I'm going up, sometimes I'm going down. But just before we did the show, I took a shower, weighed myself. I came in at 209. Like, okay.
Woohoo!
Halfway there.
Yeah. That's amazing.
But to me, what it points to is you can get to the goal without treating it like a goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost counterintuitive.
Yeah.
How do you get to a goal without treating it like a goal, but you actually can?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you don't have to be so meticulous about it.
Right.
When I was on that journey, weighing myself every day, because that's what my little app told me to do. I did Noom or something like that. And it's like, you got to weigh yourself every day. And it was interesting to watch the emotional roller coaster and what I had attached to it. Like some days it would be down, and then it would go back up, and then it would go down like 3 pounds. And then it was just so interesting. And it helped me let go of that attachment.
Yeah.
Because it was like, once I get to 135, I will be happy because I will be skinny. And it's interesting because maybe it was like 138. That's kind of where I wanted to be, was 138. Then
let's be honest, our weight varies throughout the day. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So in the morning, before eating anything, that's at the end of the day, that's what I wanted to be, was 138. Cause I remember when I did the crash diet that I felt too skinny almost at like 135, 130, like just in between 130 and 135. Yeah. I felt too skinny, if you will. And it was probably because I did it in a crash diet.
That would have something to do with it. Yeah, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. But it was interesting to get to that number and not feel the same things as I did before. Like, I didn't feel super skinny. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, my body looks different because I did it in a healthy way instead of just cutting out all carbs and sugars and only eating 500 calories a day for months on end.
Which, by the way, we do not recommend.
Yeah, I do not recommend. No, that was the awful crash diet that I put myself through for my 30th birthday. But it didn't feel the same, like even being that same weight. It was the exact same weight. But what that did for my brain was it broke that belief that, when I'm the perfect weight, then I will feel good about my body. It broke that connection so that I could have an even deeper connection with my body. And it was no longer about the number. I wasn't connected to that number so much anymore. So when it went up or it went down, like as I cycled throughout the month, just being a woman, it's going to fluctuate, but I wasn't attached to it negatively in that same way. And now I'm 128 pounds and I don't feel malnourished and I don't look malnourished whatsoever. Completely different. And I also it's interesting because I don't feel as thin as I was when I did the crash diet. I feel really good about myself. And I mean, it took a year and a couple of months to get there. But it wasn't the same journey as the crash diet because I wasn't like, I gotta do this and I gotta do that. It was more of what does my body need next? Where do I want to go next? What's good for me now? And challenging these belief systems along the way. Like, can I lose weight and still have all the things that I want to? Yes, absolutely. Can I still be healthy and still eat within reason all the things that I want to? I don't know. Let's find out. And I would do it. And then I had dinner with a friend and they were like, oh, I haven't had pizza in forever. And I was like, oh, I love pizza. And, they're like, well, I'm trying to lose weight for this or that or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm working on losing weight too. And they're like, oh, so you haven't had pizza in a long time either. And I was like, no, I eat whatever I want within reason and like portion wise. Like, I don't have an entire pizza. Not that I'd be able to eat that anyway, but it's different. I I wanted to go through this journey and not, restrict myself in any way. If I wanted ice cream, I wanted to eat ice cream. And so I did. And I still lost the weight.
I'm reminded of conversations that I had with a co-host. This would have been, when was this? I'm going to say around 5 or 6 years ago. It was right after I went from doing once a week to daily on the podcast.
Yeah.
And this one co-host was one of the group that came in as that set of co-hosts at that point. Her name is Wendy Dillard. And I remember she had a very organized way of doing the podcast. She would have things that she would attack. So for like, 2 or 3 month period, we were going after money. And after a 2 or 3 month period, we were going after relationships and after health issues and weight. And like one of the last things she did was the weight thing. And, she called it Project Body, which was a really interesting title.
Yeah.
And the approach that she took was kind of similar to what you were talking about. The approach that she took was, if she wanted to have something that was, quote, bad, unquote, first thing is she stopped thinking about it as bad. And the second thing she did is she would have daily conversations with her internal being. And she would ask her internal being, can I have this? And the internal being would say yes or no. It would depend, right?
Yeah.
And depending on what that message was, she would follow what the message was. And we never actually completed that series. She ended up leaving the podcast before we could complete it. So I never found out exactly how it all played out. But I do know that while she was doing it, she was achieving results. She was losing weight. How much, I don't remember, but there was that happening. So I thought that when you were talking, that sounded almost like what Wendy was doing. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, we get so wrapped up in our minds of like what is good and what is bad. And we stop listening to ourselves about all things. Or, for a long time, I kept saying, well, I'll lose weight after I have kids. Like, cause, my body's going to be destroyed after I have kids. Look at all these bad beliefs, right? I'm going to get so fat when I have kids. So what's the point of doing it now? And I was waiting for us to get pregnant to have the body that I wanted to have. Like, sure. There's no point in trying because it'll all be for naught.
Yeah.
And those were all these belief systems that were living in my head. So I was literally waiting to live my life until we had kids. And we've been trying for, 4 years. So, I was waiting all this time, and then it put all this pressure on having kids and like all this just pressure around everything in my life. And I was like, well, okay, well, if we get pregnant during my journey of weight loss, who cares? And now that I'm, relatively at the space that I want to be in, I'm happy with where I am. I understood the journey and I've learned a lot and I loved the process. It was all good. I'm really grateful because, I'm down 30 some pounds from the time that I started. Yeah. And now when I actually do get pregnant, my body is in a healthier space. Yeah. And it's not like I have that 30 pounds plus whatever it was gained from having a child to all lose. Like it's way more manageable from this space than I think it would have been the opposite way. And maybe that's why we haven't had kids yet. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. That's the portion yet to be written. We'll have to find that one out. Yeah. One thing though that comes to my mind as you're talking about this, I've heard numerous experts say losing weight actually isn't difficult. It's keeping the weight off. And I've thought about that and wondered about it. Because like I said, my body for years, I never had any concern. I was, very high metabolism. So, it didn't matter what I ate. I never put on weight. No big deal. I just kept going. And then all of a sudden in later years, well, yeah, apparently is a big deal. But now that I've actually been on something of a small weight loss journey compared to what many people have gone through or are facing, I'm now more curious about that question. Why is it so difficult for people to keep it off? And I'm suspecting it's because more of what people do is tied to let's follow the weight down and lose the weight using whatever method we have to, rather than the second one. Because you described two. The first one, it was where you did the binge loss. And the second one was a much more controlled, I'm going to do things within moderation, within reason approach.
Yeah.
And the second one, I don't think it was so much that, it was more of the mindset that was associated with it that I think was really making the whole thing happen. So I'm thinking mindset probably is the difference between whether or not you keep the weight off or not.
I agree. I think it is. And the way that you see yourself. Because if you do like a crash diet like I did, I was never comfortable in that body that it crashed down to. Because one, I got there so fast and I was so brutal to my body to get there. It was unhealthy. I never dealt with the thoughts that gained the weight in the first place or kept me unhealthy or whatever. Like I didn't take care of any of those things. I didn't take care of myself. Whereas this, the last year and a half, I really took care of myself and loved myself again and took care of the beliefs that were keeping me stuck in this old image that I had versus this one. And I had time to like settle in to each stage as I got there. So it wasn't just like this shock, like jumping in a pool and then you get right back out. Yeah. So I think mindset has everything to do with it.
Now there's another factor that I've heard from many people, which I will generically label as the genetic factor, although I think it's actually bigger than that. I can think of people who've told me, I do all the right things and nothing ever sheds. I follow the different diets. None of the diets work. In fact, Wendy she was one of the people who told me that she knows every single diet in existence and none of them really work. That was her opinion.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I can understand and appreciate that. By the same token, I asked myself, what was working for Wendy and what does work for other people? And when we talk about the mindset and we talk about the not beating yourself up and that kind of thing, it makes me think, even for people who have the quote genetic unquote disability, for lack of a better term, I'm wondering what role mindset plays for them. And I've never experienced what they've experienced. I'm not trying to take anything away from what they're experiencing because I believe their experience is legitimate. They believe that all the things that they've tried to do don't work. So I get it. It doesn't work. I mean, that's certainly congruent with my own belief about how belief works. So why not? I still wonder though about the mindset piece. And it's hard to ask somebody who experiences that kind of experience about the mindset piece because the answer that I tend to get back are, yes, I am mindset oriented and I'm aware of the mindset, but really that doesn't play a big role. And I respect their view. I respect their opinion on it. And there's that little niggling thing in the back of my head that says, yeah, but what if?
I think it does. I respect that that's where someone is at this moment in time and that's where they're comfortable and that's all they can see right now and that's okay. And challenge it because I think it's all within our own mind. Everything. Even the stuff that happens within our DNA. I just watched something on TikTok. What is his name? Billy Carson. Billy Carson was talking about our DNA and how our DNA, and I'm going to butcher this, but our DNA is like a zip disk. And it just simply holds information. And he was talking about how our, like, one fleck of DNA, like one tiny speck of DNA can hold blah, 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 megabytes, gigabytes. I don't know anything about the bytes.
Large amounts of bytes. We're talking
large amounts of bytes of information. And he was relating it to coding from a computer. So we're coding from the inside. There's a code, the genetic code, the makeup, which we have the ability to change if you know how to code it properly. And then the result, the reality surrounding you, all around you, will completely change. It's the same concept as when you change within, you change the outside picture. The DNA is a part of that. I truly believe that. And I think that when you understand how with frequency or your mind or different practices, how to begin changing those programs within your DNA, you can change everything. So for where you're at right now, that's true. And there's a billion other possibilities and a billion other truths that also exist at the exact same time.
I like that. I'm also thinking about something I heard someone say, not in regard to weight management, in regard to, I think it was diseases or something like that. But it was a geneticist, and the geneticist was making the point that, yes, we have this whole DNA structure, but in terms of the number of possible permutations that are in there, compared to the number of possible permutations where diseases are concerned and where, illnesses and paths of illness and so forth are concerned, there isn't enough DNA for all of it. It's not even close. The permutations of the other are so much greater, like orders of magnitude greater, that you can't possibly assign it all to DNA. And when I heard that, it raised a question in my mind, which is, well, if it's not DNA, what is it? Because there's something going on there. I mean, there's always, anytime we're talking about mind applying to us in this physical reality, there's a physical side to it.
Yeah.
Somewhere there is a physical side going on. And what I have kind of evolved to over time, I'm curious to know what your take is going to be. I've kind of evolved to the point of what falls in, it gets described a lot of different ways, with a lot of different labels. But basically, it's the non-electromagnetic, energetic force, if you will, that connects us all together and connects life, the universe, and everything all together. And that my suspicion is within that continuum of non-electromagnetic energy, whatever that is, that continuum is where the information gets stored. Mm-hmm. Some people call it Akashic records. Some people call it genetic or species memory. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways of labeling it. And if it has some semblance of truth to it, if there is some kind of massive data storage going on there, well, that also tells me is completely driven by mindset, which I find to be very encouraging.
Yeah.
That's true. If what I've laid out is true, then it makes sense what the Abraham Hickses of the world teach us. Mm-hmm. It makes sense what the streams of David teach us, that we have within our thoughts and beliefs the ability to change everything.
Everything. Yeah.
How many times can we say everything?
I don't know. I think we should just keep saying it until everybody in the world grasps it, but we might need it for a long time. And I think that's one of the great lies, the maybe great distortions of our society is that we're helpless and we're, controlled by our circumstances. We were talking about it last week with our guest, and, he brought up that study of how much of your happiness percentage wise is due to your circumstances.
Right.
And I think he said it was 10 or 20%.
Something like that. 10% is what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. 10%. And then he said, 40% or 50% DNA. Mm-hmm. Well, now if we bring both of those things back to this conversation, if your DNA is simply a code and you can change the code, then you've got that 40% back. Mm-hmm. Or 50%, whatever the number was. And if your perspective, your mindset and your perspective, those coupled determines how you perceive your circumstances, then you can change that last 10%. Therefore, 100% of your happiness is determined by you.
Yeah. That's pretty encouraging. That's
right.
Encouraging you're going to get. Yeah.
The ball's in your court. You have complete control, autonomy, empowerment to have everything. And I just wish that more people believed that were true. What kind of world would we live in if everybody in the world knew inside, they had this deep knowing that they were empowered to create anything they could dream of?
I think we're in the age where people are going to, I don't know how many years, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, we're going to look back and say, wow, this is where we all got it.
Yeah.
I think Absolutely. That's exactly what
that conversation with Walt and Jody Lynn.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that was the one. Yes. January 18, 2023. That's when it all changed. No, not really.
Maybe.
But here's what I do know. When we take this back to the original conversation we were having about New Year's resolutions, I think it becomes really evident why it is that New Year's resolutions don't work and what does work instead.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can start thinking about the whole question of how do we make change differently.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something associated with New Year's Eve.
No.
It doesn't have to be something where, oh my God, I have to do it now, where the 28,000 million point plan. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It can actually be friggin' easy.
Yeah.
Which is in and of itself so mind blowing that I think a lot of people are just going to turn off and say, well, yeah, that can't be true. Right?
I agreed. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And maybe there will be a few who are inspired to get creative with it and, you know, like start listening to their intuition, their gut, their, you know, that voice that is leading them in the direction and, you know, start picking up breadcrumbs. That has been the coolest journey of my life, like learning to channel and following my intuition and the amount of stuff that I've uncovered, about the financial system, about contracts, law, like so much stuff about my country and like how we were formed and everything like that. Like, I have no idea how I have ended up on some of these websites or looking at these acts or whatever. I do it all by intuition and guided by my guides, like go over here, go over there. And the more that I lean in, the faster the information comes. And I've met people who have researched the same topic that I am, but 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And we are light years ahead of where they are and never read a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think you described it as playing with it. I love that description.
Yeah.
Because now it isn't a goal. It isn't a rigid structure that has to be built. It's play.
Yeah.
And play is open-ended. It's creative. It changes from moment to moment. And there are no standards that you have to be held to because it's play.
Yeah. So maybe the question should be not, you know, what is my resolution or what do I want to be resolute about for 2023? It's what do I want to play with in 2023?
Ooh, that feels good.
Yeah.
That feels really good.
Yeah. Ooh, that feels amazing.
What happens when we start playing with something that feels really good?
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that happens is we actually stick to it.
Yeah. Well, if you're having fun at it, it's like a game when you're a kid. You don't want to stop.
Yeah.
You want to keep going. And it goes right back to the belief systems because a lot of times people quit, myself included, because of the perception of something's missing or not fun or, you know, whatever. If we could just start shifting that to how could this be fun? How could weighing myself every day be fun? You just explained how that was fun for you, Walt. You know, like so cool to watch my body react to what I was putting into it, what I was doing to it, like how fast it absorbed whatever I was doing, the activity that I was doing. It's incredible. Your body, your brain, you as a human being, your soul is absolutely incredible. You're an incredible being.
Exactly
So
true.
play with it.
Well, I'll tell you what, the experience has shifted my mindset about what is involved in weight maintenance and achieving the kind of weight you want to have. Because now I realize I've been buying into a falsehood. You talk about the lies that we learn. I had bought into a lie. And the lie was that for many people, their weight never changes no matter what they do. Mm-hmm. And now I understand the weight changes every single day. It changes hour by hour.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Could you imagine your body being completely stagnant? It couldn't function. Your lungs need to breathe. Your heart needs to beat. Your digestive system needs to do all of its tiny little jobs as it goes through and cleans you out. Like, you don't want that. You don't want, I don't know what, stagnant I was going to say a word that doesn't exist, but you don't want your body to be stagnant. You don't want your life to be stagnant. That's not the goal. How boring is that? And destructive. If it was your body that was completely stagnant, I think that means you're dead. We don't want that.
Yeah. That is what that means. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the belief that it's never changing isn't even represented in reality, which I find to be reassuring because, I mean, if I eat, let's say I've had a dinner, and if I were to literally weigh the food that was on the dinner plate and it weighed, I don't know, 1.2 pounds. Once I eat that food, if I don't expect that my body is going to weigh 1.2 pounds more in that instant in time, I'm crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, let's violate the laws of physics in order to justify why I can't lose weight. That's about what that amounts to, right? And it's not like it's going to stay there because the whole point of taking the food is to burn it as energy. So like, in a few hours, that 1.2 pound gain could be down to like a 0.1 pound loss. I mean, it's going to shift like that. It's going to shift pretty substantially throughout the day. Well, once I see it as a dynamic rather than a static, that's an entirely different set of circumstances.
It sure is.
Yeah. Wow. And all happening because of mindset. Starting with mindset. Let's put it that way. Maybe not because of, but starting with mindset.
Yeah.
So once again, mindset becomes the basis for all of it. The foundation.
Absolutely.
And you got to have a good foundation if you want the building to stand.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want it built in sand.
And look what the result was. You got yourself down to 128 and you thought 130 was too thin.
Yeah. It's completely different. And I didn't even know that I did it because I'd stopped weighing myself.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I went to the doctor to go get some tests and that's when they weighed me and it was during the day and I was like 132 or something. And I was like, I am always heavier during the day because I'm eating and that's okay. That's not a big deal. But I know that about my body is that if I've weighed in the morning and I weigh at night, they're two different numbers. Yeah. And so I'll weigh in the morning because I typically like that number more than the secondary one, right? So I'll go with that one. But, and I feel like maybe that's more my true weight. I don't know. That's what I will say. So when I saw that number, I was like, I think I'm under 130 pounds. And like high school is the last time. Like I literally went up to my parents' house and got my graduation dress from high school and put it on.
And it fit.
And it fit.
Wow.
It was too big.
It was too big.
Yes. And I immediately texted my best friend from high school and was like, shut the front door. Look at this. Because I wasn't expecting it. Like it was just a marvel. Like, oh my God, I didn't even know that I'd, lost another 5 pounds or whatever it was since I stopped weighing over the last 5 months or whatever it was. It was pretty cool.
I experienced something similar. I mean, it was before I'd been on this last bit, I'd gotten it down to about 218. I wanted to get down below that. And I think it was within 2 or 3 weeks after that. So I think I probably lost 2 or 3 at that point. I decided to try on a pair of pants that I couldn't put on before. And to my amazement, not only could I put them on, I could actually close them without struggling to do it. I thought,
wow.
Oh my goodness. And I still hadn't even reached my goal yet.
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I hope it helps some people who have been struggling with resolutions. Cause I mean, we both know how troubling resolutions can be, but maybe we've kind of shifted the whole thing a bit here.
Hopefully.
I think
Hopefully.
So. Yeah.
And allowed people to give themselves some grace.
That's a big piece of it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
It's hard to achieve a goal no matter what it is, or even get to a place no matter what it is, if you're being tough on yourself.
Yeah.
It's so much easier when you're giving yourself grace.
Yeah. And having fun with it. When you're playing with it, like we just said.
Right.
And I mean, this takes practice. Like I am not a master at, being playful with my entire life. I get caught up in the,
Sure.
the thick of it too. We're human and that's okay too. But just having that perspective of having fun, like you're not supposed to, drudge through life until you get to retirement and then you get to live. You get to live now, right now,
Right.
in this moment.
It's a great way to wind up the conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jody Lynn. As usual, this has been wonderful. Looking forward
Thank
to talking
you.
to you next week. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.